Wales has its fair share of spooky stories filled with myth, legend, and mystery. In this video, we are looking at some of its haunted ancient castles, each with its own chilling ghost stories, with a thrilling mix of history, the paranormal, and unexplained phenomena. We start with Carew Castle, which sits beside a tidal river in Pembrokeshire, on ground that has been fortified since the Iron Age. Around the year 1100, a Norman baron named Gerald de Windsor took the castle as his home after marrying a noblewoman named Princess Nest. She was known across Wales for her beauty, so widely that people called her the Helen of Wales. That beauty brought danger. In 1109, Princess Nest's own cousin, a nobleman named Owain ap Cadwagan, became obsessed with her. He led a raid on the castle in the middle of the night. Her husband Gerald escaped through a toilet chute in the castle wall while the princess stayed behind. She was taken from her home and held by Owain for a period before eventually being returned to her family. Princess Nest had an eventful life, born a princess, became a king's mistress, was abducted, married a nobleman, and had 9 children to 5 different fathers. Despite what happened to her, the ghost linked to Princess Nest carries none of the turbulence of her life. Visitors and staff describe her as a white lady, a soft, glowing shape seen drifting through the corridors and stairwells. She appears most often on nights with a full moon, moving slowly along the same paths she would have walked as the lady of the castle. Nobody who has reported seeing her describes fear. Most say the opposite, a calm presence, unhurried, as if she is simply still living inside the walls she once called home. But Carew holds a second story, and this one carries none of that peace. In the 17th century, a tenant named Sir Rowland Rees lived in the castle's northwest tower. He kept a wild animal there, a Barbary ape he had brought back from Africa and named Satan. One night, a merchant named Horowitz came to the tower to confront Sir Rowland over his son's elopement with the merchant's daughter. In his anger, Sir Rowland set the ape on him. The animal mauled Horowitz badly enough that he barely escaped alive. As he fled the castle, bleeding, he cursed Sir Rowland to suffer the same fate he had just survived. That night, castle staff woke to screaming from the tower. When they reached it, they found Sir Rowland dead on the floor, his throat torn open. The ape lay dead beside him. Some nights, people still report a howling sound rising from the tower, carried on the wind toward the battlements. Some describe hearing something moving up the old stone stairs, though nothing is ever found. The castle holds both these hauntings at once, a woman remembered gently, and an animal remembered as a warning. The castle keeps them both the same way it has kept its walls standing for 900 years. Craig-y-nos Castle stands in the Brecon Beacons, a Victorian Gothic house with a history that turned dark long before its most famous resident arrived. It was first owned by the Powell family, and locals came to believe the house itself was cursed, since almost every family member who lived there died young. In 1878, the castle was bought by Adelina Patti, one of the most famous opera singers in the world. She lived there for over 40 years, until her death in 1919. She fell down the stairs, caught pneumonia from the fall, and spent her final stretch of life bedridden inside the house she loved. Her body was later laid out in the castle's private chapel, in a room still known as the Slab Room. 3 years after her death, the castle took on a new purpose. It became a tuberculosis sanatorium, treating sick children and teenagers who were separated from their families for years at a time while they tried to recover. Adelina Patti's presence is said to have stayed behind, and unlike many of the spirits recorded elsewhere in Wales, hers is remembered as gentle. She has been seen as a small woman in a black dress, moving through the courtyards, or as a pale figure standing on the stage of her old private theatre. People reported her operatic voice, where singing has been heard drifting from empty rooms and gardens with no performer in sight. One account from the sanatorium years describes a young girl too frightened to sing at a hospital concert. She later claimed the singer's ghost appeared backstage and stayed with her until she found the courage to walk out and perform. Her spirit is not always calm, though. Playing recordings of her actual voice inside the theatre has been known to provoke a different reaction: slamming doors, sudden cold, and loud banging noises. the sanatorium years left their own mark. In the old children's ward and the conservatory nearby, visitors describe the sound of babies crying and children laughing, coming from rooms that have sat empty for decades. Some ghost hunters walking through these spaces report sudden difficulty breathing, as though something in the air itself remembers what it was like for the children who once struggled there. One more spirit is tied to the grounds. A gardener named John Mellon is said to have taken his own life after a forbidden romance with a housemaid named Charlotte was forced to end. Guests who have stayed in his old room describe a tight, choking pressure around their neck, gone as quickly as it came. Craig-y-nos holds all of this quietly. A house built for music, then for healing, and now for something that never fully leaves either behind. Castell Coch, also known as the Red Castle, rises from the hillside above Cardiff, a fairy tale-looking fortress built over the ruins of a 13th century Norman fort. Thick woods of ancient beech surround it, closing the castle off from the roads below and keeping the grounds in near-permanent shadow, even in daylight. The most well-known figure tied to the castle is a soldier known simply as the Cavalier. According to local history, he fought in the Civil War and hid a large sum of gold somewhere inside the castle walls before he left for battle. He never returned to collect it. He was killed in the fighting, and whatever he buried has never been found. A servant who once lived at the castle described waking in the night to find a silent figure standing at the foot of his bed, a man in old military dress who said nothing and simply stood there before vanishing. Since then, others staying overnight have reported the same experience, a presence in the room, watching, and gone by the time a light is switched on. A second sadder story belongs to a woman remembered as Dame Griffiths. She lived at the castle generations ago, and her young son wandered into the woods surrounding the property. He fell into a pool of black water and drowned. His body was never recovered. Dame Griffiths is said to have died of grief not long after, and her ghost is still described moving through the dark corridors of the castle, room by room, searching for a boy she will never find. The castle also carries an older piece of folklore tied to Aforbach, a medieval nobleman said to have used witchcraft to turn 2 of his soldiers into stone eagles, set to guard gold buried somewhere on the grounds. According to the story, when thieves once tried to steal that gold, the eagles came to life and killed them where they stood. Visitors today still describe stone eagle carvings on the castle roofline, watching them as they walk the grounds below, though no one claims to have seen them move. In the castle's deepest chambers, people report an intense feeling of being watched, coming from no visible source. In the Great Hall, visitors describe loud, unexplained banging and the sensation of unseen hands pressing against their arms and shoulders. Castell Coch waits, the same way the Cavalier's gold still waits somewhere inside these walls, and the same way Dame Griffiths is still searching for what the woods took from her. Cardiff Castle sits at the centre of the city, built over the remains of a Roman fort first raised in 55 AD. In the Victorian era, the wealthy Bute family rebuilt it into an opulent Gothic home, filling it with the kind of wealth that, according to the castle's stories, never quite left. The most well-documented haunting here is the phantom coach. Witnesses since the 19th century have described hearing a heavy, horse-drawn carriage approach the castle gates at night, its wheels loud against the stone, only to watch it pass straight through the solid wooden barriers as if they weren't there. The coach is remembered as a warning. According to family history, it is only heard in the nights before a member of the Bute family dies. A family trustee named John Boyle reported hearing the carriage arrive in November 1868, then walked out to an empty courtyard. Years later, the Marquess's own daughter heard the identical sound on the night her father died. That father was John Crichton Stewart, the second Marquess of Bute, who died suddenly inside the castle in 1848. He is said to still walk its halls, dressed in a red Victorian coat, passing directly through a section of stone wall that was once a doorway during his life. At exactly 3:45 in the morning, the same hour he died, the heavy locked doors of the main dining room have been reported opening and closing on their own, with the lights switching on and off at the same moment. In 1976, a young couple on one of the castle's staircases described a tall, cloaked man pushing past them in a hurry. He turned and scowled at them before disappearing. The woman later recognized his face from a portrait of the second Marquess hanging nearby. Other figures are said to move through the castle as well. A faceless woman named Sarah is blamed for objects thrown around an old stockroom. In the tunnels beneath the castle, visitors have described the sound of marching footsteps, as though Roman soldiers still patrol beneath the modern building above them. One more spirit, a white lady, is tied to a private tragedy. Her young son is said to have fallen into a bottomless pool of black water somewhere on the grounds and drowned. Her repeated appearances afterward were, according to the story, enough to drive Lady Bute from the castle entirely. Cardiff Castle does not hide what waits inside it. The coach still arrives when it needs to. The doors still move at their appointed hour. And somewhere beneath a city of nearly 500,000 people, something in the tunnels is still marching. Caerphilly Castle is the second largest castle in Great Britain, a 13th century fortress ringed by wide artificial lakes built for its defence. Those lakes are often covered in a thick mist that rolls in off the water and settles over the grounds, and locals say the mist itself is part of what the castle keeps. The best-known ghost here is the Green Lady, remembered as Princess Alice of Angoulême. She was married to the castle's builder, a powerful nobleman known as Red Gilbert de Clare, and their marriage was a cold, unhappy one. Alice fell in love with a Welsh prince named Gruffydd the Fair, and for a time she kept the affair secret. She made the mistake of confessing it to a monk, believing he could be trusted. He told her husband instead. Gilbert's response was swift and brutal. He sent Alice away and ordered his men to find her lover. When the prince learned the monk had betrayed Alice, he had the man hanged in a nearby valley. Gilbert's men then caught up with Alice's lover and hanged him from a gallows in return. When a messenger was sent to tell Alice her lover was dead, the news killed her on the spot. Her ghost is said to have returned to the castle, where she is seen floating between the towers dressed in green, the colour chosen, according to the story, specifically to mock her husband's jealousy in death the way she couldn't in life. Security staff at the castle reportedly avoid patrolling the flag tower alone, not because of anything they've seen, but because of a heavy, sweet scent of perfume that settles in the air there. The second haunting has nothing tragic or romantic about it. Around the misty grounds near the castle gates, witnesses describe a creature known in Welsh folklore as the Gwrach-y Rhibyn, a figure with glowing black eyes, long talons, and wings like leather. She is not seen often, but she is heard. A long, wailing scream rising out of the mist, said to warn of a death coming to a nearby family before it happens. Two very different presences share the same ground at Caerphilly Castle. One is a woman still mourning a love that cost her everything. The other gives no such explanation for what it is or why it screams. Visitors walking the misty paths near the gates at dusk are left with only the sound to go on and no way of knowing, until later, whether it meant anything at all. Ruthin Castle was built in 1277 for King Edward I, raised on the site of an older red stone fort. Over the centuries, it served as a battleground, a noble family's home, and eventually a private hospital before becoming the hotel it is today. Long before any of that, it was also a place built for pain. Between 1579 and 1580, the Welsh poet Richard Gwyn was imprisoned and tortured within its walls before his execution. The castle's best-known ghost carries a story of jealousy and murder. In the 15th century, a woman living at Ruthin discovered that her husband, Reginald de Grey, the castle's second-in-command, was having an affair with a local peasant girl. She found the two of them together, and in a moment of rage, killed the young woman with an axe. Some versions of the story claim she turned the axe on her husband instead, or that it was his mistress alone who died by it. Whichever version is true, the wife was arrested soon after, tried for murder, and beheaded for the crime. Because she had killed, local priests refused to bury her on holy ground. She was laid to rest outside the castle walls instead, and legend holds that her husband's mistress was buried in the same grave beside her. Today, staff and guests describe seeing her ghost moving through the old corridors, along the battlements, and through the banquet hall. Some say she still carries the axe she used that day. Guests staying overnight in the castle's rooms report sudden cold spots with no clear cause, along with a persistent feeling of being watched by someone standing just out of sight. A second, quieter ghost is remembered as Lady Catherine, who died of a broken heart in 1695 at only 16 years old. She had been caught with a stable hand and was locked away in the castle tower as punishment, where she remained until her death. Other figures reported at Ruthin include a ghostly soldier seen wearing only one glove, walking the grounds alone, and a young girl who is said to make her presence known to guests staying overnight, though no one has identified who she was in life. Ruthin holds these stories the way it has always held difficult things, inside stone walls built for defence, now standing quiet around whatever is still there. The Grey Lady is the one guests ask about most, but she is rarely the only presence reported in a single night. Something in these halls seems to remember every version of what happened here, even the ones no one agrees on. Gwydir Castle is a 16th century manor house in the Conwy Valley, rebuilt around 1490 by the Wynne family using stone taken from a dissolved medieval abbey. Of the 7 castles in this collection, none carries a haunting as physically documented as this one. The story begins with Sir John Wynne, a powerful landowner remembered as a cruel and controlling man. According to historical accounts, he began a relationship with a young serving maid working in the castle. When the situation became difficult for him, he murdered her. To hide what he had done, he sealed her body into a hidden cavity beside a chimney breast in a space originally built to hide priests during times of religious persecution. For months afterward, the smell of her decaying body filled the castle, and there was nothing anyone could do to find its source. During a modern renovation, builders opened a section of wall near the old ghost room and found the hollow space exactly where the stories said it would be. Since then, a specific hallway near that chimney has carried an unexplained smell, described the same way every time: decaying meat, the smell gone as quickly as it arrived. The ghost of the murdered maid, seen as a grey or pale figure, has been reported in the corridor nearby. Visitors also describe sudden sharp drops in temperature and the sensation of a cold hand tapping their shoulder from behind, with no one there when they turn. Sir John Wynne himself is remembered in 2 different men bearing his name and title. The first, who lived from 1553 to 1627, is said to haunt a spiral staircase in a tall black hat, and local legend claims his spirit is trapped beneath a nearby waterfall, forced to be purged for what he did. The second Wynne died at just 31, leaving behind a wife named Margaret, whose marriage to him had been an unhappy one. Her ghost is remembered as angry, and she is said to target men specifically. A modern owner of the castle, Peter Welford, suffered a head injury and concussion in an unexplained accident before he learned her story. Other reports at Gwydir Castle include the sound of crying children, a silent procession moving across the terrace at night, and a tall grey dog seen moving through the halls. In 1995, workers excavating the cellar uncovered the real bones of a dog buried there, confirming that something of that story, at least, was true. 7 castles and 7 different ways for the past to stay present. A woman remembered gently, a soldier remembered violently, a smell that returns to the same hallway, decades after builders confirmed exactly where it comes from and still found no way to make it stop. Wales holds lots more castles like these, each with its own record waiting to be opened. For now, the walls that remain standing keep doing what they have always done, holding on to whatever was left behind inside them, long after everyone who remembers why has gone. Until next time, stay curious and keep watching the shadows.